A day after the bombshell FISA memo becomes public, President Trump says it, quote, totally vindicates him in the special counsel probe. And yet, quote, the Russian witch hunt goes on and on. Coming up in minutes here, we'll talk with the White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley.
Plus, the Dow drops over 600 points. What does it mean for your 401k come Monday morning?
And we'll take you behind the scenes at a high-tech police drill designed to help businesses contain the carnage if there is a mass shooting. Hello there and welcome to America's News. Hello there. Welcome to America's News headquarters on this Saturday afternoon from Washington. I'm Blake Berman.
It happens every time your first time. We're glad to have you of the famed Fox Business Network. Nice to see you. A lot of news from the White House that you normally cover. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm Leland Vittert. President right now is down in Mar-a-Lago, but he is tweeting and saying that the Republican memo released yesterday proves he's right about the Russia investigation. That memo that we talked about so much yesterday alleges an abuse of surveillance by the FBI and the Department of Justice. Molly Hennenberg, following the very latest here in Washington as the fallout continues this weekend. Hi, Molly.
Hi, Leland. President Trump has long maintained that his campaign did not collude with the Russians in 2016, and he says this memo backs that up. In a tweet this morning, the president says, quote, this memo totally vindicates Trump in probe, but the Russian witch hunt goes on and on. There was no collusion and there was no obstruction, the word now used because after 1 year of looking endlessly and finding nothing, collusion is dead. This is an American disgrace. The memo details why the secret FISA court gave permission for the FBI to surveil a former Trump campaign advisor, Carter Page. It says the court gave the okay, based in large part, on material collected by former British spy Christopher Steele, who was paid, the memo says, $160,000 by the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign via a law firm and a research firm to dig up dirt on Trump's ties to Russia. The memo says, quote, neither the initial application to surveil Page, that's what they're talking about here, in October 2016, nor any of the renewals disclose or reference the role of the DNC, Clinton campaign, or any party campaign in funding Steele's efforts, even though the political origins of the Steele dossier were then known to senior DOJ and FBI officials. And that, Republicans say, gets to the heart of what they call abuse of power by the Department of Justice and the FBI.
What you had is in the midst of a presidential election, the FBI takes one campaign's Oppo research political document to a secret court to get a secret warrant to spy on an American citizen, and they don't tell the court who paid for it.
But the top-ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee does not believe the memo vindicates President Trump in the investigation, which goes beyond Carter Page. Congressman Adam Schiff just tweeted, quote, quite the opposite, Mr. President. The most important fact disclosed in this otherwise shoddy memo was that FBI investigation began July 2016 with your advisor, Papadopoulos, talking there about George Papadopoulos, who was secretly discussing stolen Clinton emails with the Russians. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi has called the memo, quote, a desperate attempt to distract the American people from the truth about the Trump-Russia scandal. Leland?
Molly Hennenberg, more to come throughout the next couple of hours. Molly, thank you.
Brutal day on the corner yesterday at Wall and Broad. Concerns about the impact of a tightening job market, inflation, and bond yields sent Wall Street into a tumble throughout the day yesterday. The Dow dropping an ominous 666 points. That's about 2.5% these days. The drop, the biggest percentage decline since last June's Brexit decision and the steepest point decline since the 2008 financial crisis. Friday's sell-off knocked the Dow well below 26,000, adding to a more than 1,000-point drop this week. For reaction to that and more, let's bring in the White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley. We'll get your take on the market there in a second. But first, of course, let's talk about the president's tweet this morning. He said it was a total vindication. The memo was about the probe. However, the House Speaker Paul Ryan said this earlier this week.
What this is not is an indictment on our institutions of our justice system. This memo is not an indictment of the FBI, of the Department of Justice. It does not impugn the Mueller investigation or the Deputy Attorney General.
So there, the Speaker of the House says this has nothing to do, the memo, with the Mueller investigation. The president feels vindicated. Which one is it?
I think you're conflating two separate things here. Speaker Ryan has his own opinion on things, but we're talking about the highest levels of the FBI and the DOJ. It is very clear from this memo that it casts serious doubts and concerns into the integrity of the decisions they made against Hillary Clinton and this president. When you can use the most intrusive surveillance techniques or mechanisms on American citizens, I think everyone in this country should be deeply concerned about that. And the impetus for those warrants they pushed forth in the court was a political document that is full of holes and was used and paid for by opposition research. I mean, that's very, very damaging. And not to mention, they never revealed that to the judge. That's what makes it so salacious.
So yes or no, the White House feels this vindicates the president?
It definitely moves to that decision, toward that end, because the president's been clear. There is no collusion. Obviously, there's no obstruction. These types of pieces of information that continue to come out prove the point. There's nothing there. And Democrats keep going down this road. We've been completely cooperative with Mr. Mueller and the special counsel. We've given them document time. It's wasted the taxpayers' money. And in the wave of all this negativity and all this nonsense, this president has had record-setting accomplishments in record-setting time.
I know you speak for the president, but I want to ask you about something that the vice president said yesterday. He said that it raises serious concerns about the integrity of the decisions that were made at the highest level at the FBI and the DOJ.
Right.
Does the White House feel that Rod Rosenstein is a man of integrity?
The White House believes that Rod Rosenstein serves at the pleasure of the president, and right now he's in his position. There is no conversation, there's no consideration for him to leave at this time.
The Democrats have a memo of their own. The White House put out a statement, your colleague Sarah Sanders, yesterday, essentially saying that the White House would be open to this. The president, he would be open to fully releasing this Democratic memo like he did with the Republicans?
Right, and I want to be very clear here. We follow proper procedures to protect the American people, to protect national security. We would use the same methods we did for the Republican memo as we would for the Democrat memo, and the differences could not be more stark. We did this in a reasonable, rational process with bringing in all the relevant stakeholders, members of the White House counsel, members of the national security team. Democrats instead leak it to the New York Times. That's the difference.
There's another big story coming up here over the next 5 days, and that is needing to pass a government spending bill by Thursday, or else there will be a shutdown like we saw just a few weeks ago. Where do things stand on this from the White House's perspective?
Well, look, I mean, the Schumer shutdown obviously hurt the country. It put at risk military families and their paychecks. It put at risk 8.9 million children who rely on the federal government for insurance. But it also exposed them for their stance. And their stance is very clear, that they would rather shut down the government and put those groups I mentioned at risk over protection of hundreds of thousands of people here unlawfully, illegally, as opposed to hundreds of millions of American citizens. That's where the Democrats stand. And I believe the political pressure is such, and the American people are starting to see the real difference here, that when the president comes forward and offers a package that gives them 3 times the amount of pathway to citizenship possibilities that President Obama did, they ought to be on board with that. It's rational and reasonable. It's a 70% issue to fix DACA. It's a 70% issue for the American people to get border security and end chain migration. So there is no reason we shouldn't come to a deal.
We got to run, but I want to ask you what we started with, and that is the market. The president and this administration has been pumping up this stock market day after day after day as we've seen this run up. Now there's been a pullback. Are you guys ready to own this if the pullback continues?
Look, anytime the market takes a dip, it's a sad day for the market, and it hurts American families. We obviously care about that. But this overwhelmingly, this economy is so much stronger under this president with 71 days hit of record highs. And we just saw the job report come out. 200,000 jobs added, over 2 million since he got there. Not to mention the increase in wages to the highest levels in 9 years. Overall, the economy is really good, and we hope it bounces back really quickly from this dip.
A lot coming up in Washington this week. Good to have you here on a Saturday afternoon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for your time.
All right, let's bring in Washington Congressman, ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, Adam Smith. Good to see you, Congressman, as always. Thanks for being with us. We'll start with this. Reasonable people could agree that in that memo, there are details that should be troubling to every American of the FBI not being fully forthcoming with the FISA court. Fair?
I don't agree with that at all. In fact, the argument that was just made is fascinating. In the first place, the warrant was not based on the dossier. Carter Page has had links to Russian intelligence people going back to 2013, if you read the stories. There was a mountain of evidence that Carter Page was having improper connections with Russian intelligence operatives. But here's the beauty of the logic. So you say, it was all based on the dossier. And then you say, and what's worse, the FBI didn't even mention the dossier came from the Democratic sources. The dossier was not the basis of the warrant that they got. That's the fundamental flaw in the argument and the cherry-picked facts that Devin Nunes has put out there. Look, I don't know what people are paying attention to here, but Michael Flynn, Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with the Russian officials. There is a mountain of evidence of high-ranking Trump campaign officials having met with the Russians during the course of the campaign. It wasn't all about this memo.
These are two vastly different. There are two vastly different issues here. One is an issue of, was the FBI fully forthcoming with the FISA court? Was there an attempt within the FBI and at DOJ to cherry pick facts, as you just used those same words, or not? If cherry-picking facts is okay for the FBI, why isn't it okay for Republicans?
What facts did they cherry-pick? Let's take a step back.
Well, not disclosing exculpatory evidence as part of the FISA
court to try to establish. I'm sorry, I don't want to talk over you. Go ahead. Not
disclosing exculpatory evidence or full context to the FISA court is something that's considered at the very exculpatory evidence to be where you're getting this information.
Was not. I'm sorry, I paused for you. Can you pause for me for just a second? The dossier was not the basis of the warrant against Carter Page. So you set up this brilliant argument that says, the dossier, was the key to it, and the Justice Department didn't disclose this. The flaw is that the dossier was not the key, or did not have hardly anything to do with the getting of the warrant against Carter Page, and beyond that, for the president to say. And look, the main thing that I want out of this, the Russians launched an effort against our democracy. They're doing the same. They're doing the same throughout Western Europe. This president has never acknowledged
Congressman, you've made this point 3 or 4 times that the dossier wasn't the reason for the warrant. Yet from the memo, reading from the memo, furthermore, Deputy Director McCabe so you're saying the memo? So you're saying you have information that makes
I'm
this
saying
memo
the memo
incorrect.
Is not accurate.
But how do you know? How do you know? I keep hearing this over and over again. How do you know that? Have you read any of the warrants?
It's hard to know. Let me. Can I answer the question?
If you have the answer,
can I answer the question?
Yeah. How do you know this memo is inaccurate?
No. All right. Please just let me talk. The warrant was against Carter Page, and the argument that is advanced by Devin Nunes is the only way they could have gotten a warrant against Carter Page was based on this dossier. We know factually that is false, that there is a mountain of evidence about Carter Page's connections to Russian intelligence, his trips back and forth to Moscow, and the things that have, just like with Michael Flynn and a lot of other people, that had nothing to do with the dossier. That is a known fact. Carter Page had links to Russian intelligence that had nothing to do.
Congressman, you must know something that the Deputy Director of the FBI didn't. Furthermore, the Deputy Director
not true. How do you say the Deputy Director?
The Deputy Director testified before the committee in December 2017 that no surveillance warrant would have been sought. There would have been no warrant from FISA without the Steele dossier information. You say there's a mountain of evidence. So far, you've cited nothing. They're citing testimony from the Deputy Director of the FBI. He's saying he would not have sought a warrant despite all the evidence you're talking about.
I've said that all, and again, there's unbelievable numbers of links between Michael Flynn and a lot of other people and what went on there. But what we really need to get at is what the president said this morning, that this proves that Russia was nothing. Look, this is about trying to stop the Russians from doing what they've been doing in our country and elsewhere, and the president has gotten in the way of that at every step. Now, personally, I think he primarily thinks that is a threat to his legitimacy as a president. It's not. Okay, he won the election, but I don't want the Russians to be messing in our election or any other democracy. They have an organized plan to do that.
His CIA director has said as much and said that he wants to stop it. Congressman, we appreciate it. Thanks for being here for sure.
But the president hasn't.
Well, his administration certainly, as they speak for him in terms of the intelligence situation. Congressman, thank you very much. We got to run. All right, a lot more to talk about. As you can tell from both sides about the fallout from the memo, Fox News Sunday, Chris Wallace will speak to former CIA Director Leon Panetta. Check your local listings for time and channel. Tomorrow, Media Buzz, Howard Kurtz talks to former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer about the media's coverage of the Mueller investigation and the FBI. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern. Coming up here on the show, live to the Winter White House in West Palm Beach. The president is spending the weekend there before heading out to the heartland to sell his State of the Union message. Plus,
Fox News alert now, and this one comes out of the Middle East as Syrian militants and observers in that area say a Russian pilot has ejected safely from a jet that was shot down but was then killed by militants after he landed on the ground. Observers there say the plane was shot down in a rebel-held province of Syria, and militants say the pilot was killed after he drew his pistol and resisted capture. A video of the pilot now circulating on social media, but Russian authorities have not confirmed the loss of the plane. We will continue to follow this and more coming up throughout the afternoon.
all right, we remember this, the Hawaiian man who sent out that false missile alert last month. Well, he's now telling his side of the story about the warning that caused nearly 40 minutes of panic on the islands. The now former employee of Hawaii's Emergency Management Agency is choosing to be anonymous, telling reporters Friday he feels bad about what happened, but thought the drill was the real deal.
The message that I heard was this is not a drill, and I didn't hear exercise at all in the message or from my coworkers.
Okay, and here's where the story gets interesting. State officials say the man has a history of mistaking drills for actual events. This was not his first time, although that ex-employee disputes that part of the story as well.
The man who allegedly sold ammunition to the Las Vegas shooter before that deadly attack is now facing charges for his connection to the tragedy. Will Carr is live from our West Coast newsroom with the very latest. Will?
Blake, authorities allege that Douglas Haig sold Stephen Paddock, the Las Vegas gunman, armor-piercing bullets. Haig, an aerospace engineer who sells ammo as a part-time hobby, was arrested Friday. He's now facing charges for conspiracy and manufacturing armor-piercing ammunition. Haig says that in September, he sold Paddock 720 rounds of tracer ammunition, which creates a flame after the bullet is fired that allows the shooter to follow the bullet's path. Paddock went on to kill 58 people and injure more than 400 others in Las Vegas in October. Haig says that when Paddock purchased the ammo, he said he was going to put on a light show. Along with numerous guns and bump stocks, authorities say they found a box of unused ammunition in Paddock's room with Haig's name on it, and at least 2 bullets had Haig's fingerprints on them as well.
I feel terrible about what happened. I keep racking my brain. What did I miss? What did I miss? There were no outward signs. He appeared as normal as anybody in this room. Very well spoken, very clean cut, very well dressed, very polite, very respectful.
The only other person of interest announced publicly has been Mary Lou Danley, Paddock's girlfriend. Authorities have said that Danley has cooperated since the attack, and they've since cleared her. Haig was released on bond on Friday. He now faces up to 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. Blake.
Well, thank you. In an effort to stay safe, employees are asking what to do if they find themselves.
They're trying to do active shooter drills here. And it's a big question, obviously, for businesses of how much training to provide employees. It is a sign of the time that some employers are now going so far as to offer real-world training. Our own Brian Yennis saw one of these drills firsthand this weekend, joins us in New York with more. So how real was it, Brian?
Very real. Leland Blake, it's one thing to be told how to respond in the event of a shooting. It's another to put it into action as gunshots go off outside your office. Inside the DeCrescenti Beverage Distribution Center in Mechanicville, New York, 50 employees are about to experience what it's like to be in an active shooter situation. The company is one of an increasing number of businesses, schools, and churches, always clear, seeking active shooter training as the number of these shootings has increased over the last 15 years nationwide.
We want them to be prepared, know what to do, and we truly want them to get home safe to their families. Open door on the right.
The Saratoga County Sheriff's Office says the number of trainings they do is up from 1 or 2 a month to 15.
I think we need to get out of this mindset. If it's going to happen, it's when is it going to happen? Am I prepared?
In this drill, they'll use live blank gunfire and mock pipe bombs to make it as real as possible. The drill begins when an officer, acting as the shooter, wounds a salesman outside. He manages to call 911. Police are en route. Hearing gunfire, the distribution center initiates a warehouse lockdown.
Want to mess with my family?
The gunman enters, firing gunshots and throwing pipe bombs, shooting an employee who did not seek cover quickly enough. The first police response arrives on scene.
Window door on the right.
And they go towards the gunshots. As the shooter fires rounds in the warehouse, the police confront him.
Shoot me! Shoot me!
A second police team treats the wounded and begins to evacuate employees locked down in their offices. Employees are taught to run, hide, or as a last resort, fight.
When you see the person coming toward you with a gun, your instinct takes over and you run.
You didn't know where he was going. You didn't know how fast the response was going to be. So it was nerve-wracking.
Employees say they were really surprised by how anxious they felt during this drill. 3 months ago, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions awarded a $5.4 million grant to the Alert Center in Texas. It's the preeminent active shooter training facility responsible for teaching some 300,000 individuals nationwide how to survive.
Fascinating. A couple of questions for you, Brian.
Yeah.
The employees knew this was a drill ahead of time, right?
They knew it was a drill ahead of time, but they did not know when exactly it was going to happen. So for many of them, their heart rate was up, and actually this was the first time many of them heard gunshots and pipe bombs exploding for the first time. So, yeah, it's one thing to be told what to do. When you start hearing those things, your body reacts in a very visceral way. So this is why these drills are so important.
Yeah, important for them, and obviously important training for the police as well. It gets them to familiarize themselves with local businesses. Brian, thank you very much. Blake's got more.
Leland, thanks. Coming up, the clock is ticking for Congress to reach a deal on a government funding deal. We'll take a look at what's going on behind the scenes to try to avoid another government shutdown. And the president is in West Palm Beach this weekend at the Winter White House, and he is already tweeting. Have you seen it this morning? What he has to say about the FISA memo. Our Phil Keating is live with the latest.
Hey, right now President Trump is just down the street at his Trump International Golf Club where he's been for a few hours. The weather in Palm Beach could be better and sunnier, but it certainly isn't single-digit temperatures like this Super Bowl weekend in Minneapolis. We'll show you what the president is tweeting this morning coming up.
Welcome back. This Saturday, President Trump saying yesterday's memo from House Republicans vindicates him. He tweeted that and more this morning as he headed to his golf club in Palm Beach. Our Phil Keating live near the president's Mar-a-Lago resort where Mr. Trump is spending the weekend. Good afternoon, Phil.
Good afternoon, Leland. President Trump said to reporters this past week it would be quite an accomplishment if this country could get unified. Well, that is certainly and clearly not happening this particularly partisan weekend. Right now, President Trump is down the street at his nearby Trump International Golf Club where he arrived just a few hours ago. He did arrive last night on Air Force One, and on the way to the golf course this morning, he did tweet this about yesterday's controversial GOP memo release. Quote, "This memo totally vindicates Trump in pro, but the Russian witch hunt goes on and on. There was no collusion and there was no obstruction." The word now being used because after 1 year of looking endlessly and finding nothing, collusion is dead. This is an American disgrace. Then the ranking Democrat on that House Intelligence Committee tweeted back, quote, Quite the opposite, Mr. President. The most important fact disclosed in this otherwise shoddy memo was that FBI investigation began July 2016 with your advisor, Papadopoulos, who was secretly discussing stolen Clinton emails with the Russians. Air Force One landed at West Palm Beach International just before 7 p.m. Eastern Time last night, and as usual for the president's Palm Beach weekends, the president tweeting and golfing with no public events scheduled. The president left behind a beltway immersed in partisan politics with that declassified House Intelligence Committee memo, which Trump and Republicans say shows the FBI and Justice Department abused their power with surveillance warrants on Trump campaign advisors, while Democrats say the controversial memo is distorted and misleading and will push to release their own committee memo next week. At the top of this hour on Fox News, White House press aide Hogan Gidley added this.
We follow proper procedures to protect the American people, to protect national security. We would use the same methods we did for the Republican memo as we would for the Democrat memo, and the differences could not be more stark. We did this in a reasonable, rational process with bringing in all the relevant stakeholders.
Now, First Lady Melania and son Barron are over there at Mar-a-Lago at the estate right now on Palm Beach, and the president should, as is expected, to then roll back from the golf club and join them in the next couple of hours this afternoon. It is Super Bowl weekend, and the president appears to be wanting to watch the game. Still unclear exactly whether they'll watch the game at Mar-a-Lago, as was the case last year, or whether Air Force One will get back to Washington in time for kickoff.
Well,
Leland?
Either way, we know he's close with Bob Kraft, so we can imagine who he will be rooting for. Phil Keating in Palm Beach. Hope you get to watch the game as well, buddy. Thanks. Blake's got more.
Let's hope.
Something else to watch. The federal government runs out of money on Thursday. Here we are once again giving Congress less than a week, just 5 days now, to reach a deal on another continuing resolution. Lawmakers, some of them, have tied a fix to DACA to the funding debate, but so far haven't made much progress on a solution for Dreamers. Joining me now to weigh in, the congressman out of Florida, Ron DeSantis. Should also mention he is running for governor in that state. Congressman, thanks for joining us this Saturday afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, I want to start with you with something your colleague Mark Meadows said. He said of a fifth CR, he said, quote, "I don't see that probability of the Freedom Caucus supporting a fifth CR without substantial changes by February 8th. Unless we see dramatic changes." So, are there going to be dramatic changes, or is the House Freedom Caucus potentially going to vote against this?
Well, I don't know. I think individual members will make their decisions. I mean, I think that clearly the Democrats really stepped in it by tying the previous CR to illegal immigration and providing benefits to illegal immigrants. That was not a good posture for them. When you're holding up funding for the military in order to benefit foreigners, non-Americans, the average citizen just doesn't think that's going to fly. I don't like continuing resolutions. I've rarely voted for them. This last one, though, I voted for because there were actually things in there that advanced our policy agenda. There were a number of Obamacare taxes that were suspended. I think those taxes are harmful. So I think what you can do is, if you're going to do another CR, that's not ideal. But if you're adding some policy changes, some things that can move the ball forward a little bit, you know, that's not ideal, but bit by bit to make progress, that's better than doing some type of immigration bill tied to the funding bill.
Speaking of immigration, though, the formula that's been laid out is a solution on DACA, and then the president gets the wall, an end to chain migration, and an end to the diversity visa lottery program. But when it comes down to it, if a deal is constructed to where it's simply DACA protections and a wall, do you think that is something that Republicans would eventually support?
My sense is probably not. And here's the thing on all this. We've seen, going back to the Reagan bill in '86, when you do amnesty and then you promise that there's going to be changes so that you don't have illegal immigration in the future, a lot of times those changes never materialize. So if you were to say, hey, we promised to build the wall if you do an amnesty for DACA, well, I think a lot of guys like me would say, what guarantee do we have that that wall's ever going to be built? I think you need to make sure that the security is there, that the policy changes are in place before you do anything like that. And I think the best bill that I've seen has been the Bob Goodlatte bill in the House, which includes things like the wall, but also E-Verify, so that we can protect the American people against future flows of illegal immigration.
Real quick, yes or no, you think the president is engaging in something that would amount to amnesty?
Well, I think he admitted that he is amnestying them. I think he's trying to call the Democrats' bluff, though. It's a generous amnesty, which they want, and yet they're still not willing to come to the table. So I think he's showing them to be hypocrites in this issue.
5 days to go until the deadline, and a long way to go. Congressman, we thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, let's bring in Democrat John Yarmuth, ranking member on the House Budget Committee, joining us from the great city of Louisville, Kentucky. Congressman, good to see you, sir, as always. Reasonable people could agree that the last time we went down this road of a government shutdown, it did not end up so well for the Democrats. How are you guys going to change the playbook this time?
Well, the problem we've had, Leland, is not what we do about DACA. That's one issue of many that we've been concerned about, and where there's a sense of urgency. Disaster relief is another thing.
Congressman, come on. We know that the political high that Chuck Schumer lived and died on over the last shutdown was on DACA. That was the only thing any Democrat would talk about. His Twitter page, not only his Twitter image, but his background image was all about "I stand with Dreamers." That's all Democrats were talking. I
understand, and I concede that we did not get the best of that in a PR sense. But the problem that's fundamental to this whole issue is that Republican leadership has not been able to put together a spending plan for the year. If we go as it's anticipated for another continuing resolution to March 23rd, we will essentially be halfway through this fiscal year without a spending plan. This wreaks havoc on, like, the Defense Department, who don't know from month to month how much money they're going to have. This is no way to run the government.
Everyone seems to agree that it's no way to run the government. House Republicans will say they have come up with a spending plan that they can get passed, that they have passed through the House, and that they could get 51 votes in the Senate. It can't get 60 in the Senate because Democrats won't come along.
Well, one of the reasons that that's the case is that Republicans have never engaged Democrats in trying to work a budget plan out.
Oh, come on, really?
Wait a minute, Leland, we're still faced with statutory budget caps that were part of the Budget Control Act of 2011. Before we do any spending plan, we have to agree on what the spending caps will be. Otherwise, we can't appropriate anything. So unless Republicans are willing to negotiate Democrats on the spending caps, we're not going anywhere.
It never ceases to amaze me that neither party seems to want to take responsibility. I understand why. I'm interested in just play this one straight for me. You're down in Louisville, Kentucky. You're meeting with your constituents. Are they angry and upset with Congress, and specifically, for that matter, with you, over this continually kicking the can down the road? Or do they accept the explanation it's the other guy's problem?
No, I think they're frustrated in general with the fact that the government appears to be dysfunctional on many levels. I don't think there's that degree of specificity that they worry about CRs and government shutdowns. They don't want to see the government shut down. But they've been down the road before, and I think people, for the most part, are kind of inured to it. They just say, well, we know it's going to get fixed. It always does. Same thing with the debt ceiling that we're going to have to lift in a matter of weeks at the most now because of the tax cuts. So, yeah, nobody's happy with Congress. That's why our approval ratings are down around 10%.
Well,
no question about that.
You guys are somewhere down around where the media is, so we're all here together talking about it. It's good. It's good. It's good to see you, Congressman. Thanks so much.
Okay, Leland.
All right, see you back here in D.C. Blake?
Great time coming up. Thousands of football fans, as you know, headed to the Super Bowl tomorrow in Minneapolis. Thousands more, by the way, headed to South Korea for the start of the Winter Olympics. There's that, too. We'll find out the massive effort that is underway to keep people safe. Plus, American workers getting a nice bonus this month, courtesy of the tax cut that was passed. Have you seen your paycheck yet? Have you got it yet? Have you thought about what you might do with it? That story coming up.